Good morning to all my friends and family, and welcome to today's episode of Jim's 5am Club. I'm down here at Cockle Bay on this magical Friday morning, the day before the weekend, and we see the brolgers dancing around this mystical billabong, and it's a still day. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day as well. Yesterday was quite wet, windy with a lot of lightning and thunder, but today hopefully we'll have much better weather so that we can get through our Friday and start enjoying another weekend as the summer comes to a close over the next couple of weeks. What I want to do today, like I normally do, is I want to go through another book summary, and today's book summary is entitled "Why is My Child in Charge?" by author Clair Lerner. And this is a book written for parents, grandparents, people who are thinking to be parents, and discusses the various challenges that one has with children and bringing up children. Because for those of us who have been parents, we'll all learn sooner or later that parenting isn't as easy as one thinks. Some children are easy to bring up, others have challenges, and regardless of what your beliefs are, one thing for sure and for certain is that you quickly learn that each child, each person is unique and very, very different from each other, and you need to use different techniques for different children. And if you don't understand that, then parenting is going to be a challenge, and you are going to have difficult days ahead of you. I remember my mother-in-law, Artemis Petropoulos, when she was alive. She would always say that the word "παιδί" in Greek didn't just come about by chance. The word "παιδί," my mother-in-law would say, comes from the concept "bedevo," which means to challenge, to create a mystery, to get you thinking and to keep you on your toes all the time. And what my mother-in-law would always say is that children are a problem that you need to solve, or you need to help solve. You need to bring a solution. So, as my spiritual father also always says, he says that becoming a parent, having children, having a family is very spiritual in a way, and it is going to bring out many lessons in one's life. So the best thing to do is to embrace it with all your might, with all your spiritual, physical, mental, psychological energy, and do the best you can, because he says that it is salvific. That's the word that I was looking for. Being a parent is salvific, because getting married, having a family, working as one with your partner to bring up 1, 2, 3, 5 children is going to be potentially the greatest challenge that you'll ever face in your life. And one of the great purposes of getting married and having children is to create an environment where you lead not only yourself to heaven, but also your partner and your children. That is one of our responsibilities. But along the way, we're going to be challenged. They're going to be good days, they're going to be bad days. But what this author says as well is that children aren't bad all the time. They're not challenging all the time. She throws a statistic that roughly about 15% of the time is what you can expect to have challenging moments from children. So children have good times, they have bad times, just like adults. You know, there are times where we're productive and empowered, and there are also times where we just lose our focus and become unproductive and disempowered. So this book is a discussion of what to expect and how to manage things along the way to be able to, I guess, get the best possible outcome you can as a parent as you traverse the pathways of parenting. What I've noticed over my lifetime is that there are certain children that bring out, I guess, the worst in their parents, and in some ways contribute to the breakup of their parents, and vice versa. There are also parents who somehow bring out the worst in their children and end up causing grief for that child, not only during their childhood years, but also during their adolescent years, which also leads into problems that they may face later in life. But one thing that I've always said throughout my life is that becoming a parent is a selfless task, and I acknowledge that it's a big challenge. Children are a mirror. They just mirror back who we are or who we're not. And one thing for sure and for certain, that you're going to have good times and bad times, good moments and bad moments, and it can go from terrible to great or great to terrible in a heartbeat. You know, we have these meltdowns and you don't really understand what caused them and where they came from. That's the reality of parenting. But I also say the other thing as well, which may be a little bit controversial. But what I say also is that even the worst parent is a good person, because they've dedicated a lot of their life, a lot of their energy to the bringing up of a child. It may not have worked out, it may not have been perfect, but even the worst parent, and I look back over life and you hear conversations where people talk about their parents and say, oh, my parent was this and my parent was that. And I sit back and remember saying to myself, well, I remember your parent when you were young, and they were a great mother, they were a great father. They did the very best they could. It may not have worked out in the end, because bringing up children is an activity done in lag time. You input, but you don't see the results of your input till later on. But I've also known of children who were difficult children when they were young, very, very difficult indeed, and you would have sworn that these children would have had a very challenging adulthood. But lo and behold, miracles happen. They end up becoming great adults, great husbands, great wives, great parents. And you just say to yourself, if your parent had lived a little bit longer, they would have seen that the fruits of their labour actually turned out pretty well. So that's just a preamble, just to get us thinking and to get us in the mood to try and learn some new OPE. But I've enjoyed my years as a parent. I enjoy my times now as a grandparent, but I know that there are times where my wife, my daughters, don't quite appreciate my parenting style. But this book here will give us a few details in terms of how to do the best with what we've got, to be able to bring up children that are balanced, that are happy, that feel that they belong in the family and become good people. Because at the end of the day, being a parent, a grandparent, a member of a community, what we strive to do is to create the environment and to leverage whatever we have to give the most that we can to our children so that they can live, learn and pass it on, so that they can grow, they can get married one day, they can have their own families and go through the good times and the bad times, knowing that that's what life is all about, being able to have your family and to live long enough to see them grow and develop. So this book here is all about decoding children's behaviours and to understand that we are habitual in nature and that there are patterns, behaviours, signs and outcomes that are fairly predictable, and to give us the resources that we can use to learn and leverage those things. And the bottom line, according to this author, is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to build self-esteem and confidence in the ones that we have responsibility for, and that to acknowledge and to understand that parenting is indeed a challenge, a great challenge for all of us, and that we tend to get thrown in the deep end. You don't learn how to become a parent. There are many books, there are many ideas. Everybody will throw their 2 bobs worth of ideas towards you when you're growing up. But because all children are unique, all children are different, we're going to have different requirements. We're going to have to do different things to work out what to do. And this book here talks about the science to practical parenting, and to understand that even though that there are a cafe of voices around, there is the right way to do things, and a way that you can just manage and build on your skills to bring out the best in your family environment. So the author here talks about mindsets, and there are 8 different mindsets that issues tend to stem from. So it's the way you see the problem, the way you see your children, the way you work together with your partner, the teachers and the other stakeholders, that will determine how you address and how you figure out the best way to handle the challenges that come from day by day. So what the author here is saying is that we need to tap into our own mindsets and also the mindsets of our children and help them shift those mindsets from a disempowered mindset to a more empowered mindset, something that is more productive. And the one clear message that comes from this author is that children need limits and they need boundaries, and that bad behaviour is infectious. We need to try and, manage it as early as possible, so that the behaviour doesn't escalate and get out of control. And to once again acknowledge and to understand that the behaviours that children express, especially the negative and unresourceful behaviours, put significant stress on a family environment and a family system. Because what happens, and this is the key message once again, is that we end up in power struggles where it's not about what's right, it's not about how we can help each other, how we can live with each other. It's more about doing things in spite of each other, and doing things which are going to damage each other just to prove a point in terms of this power struggle. Once again, the author says that being a parent is an extra job. It's stressful. We do it with lag time. And to understand that children may not be listening, but it's not that they're not listening. It just means that they're not tuned in to what you are saying, and they haven't been able to process your request, because the author brings up a beautiful concept here in the fact that children, just like adults, have two types of brains. They've got their upper brain and their lower brain. The lower brain is what we adults talk about in terms of the reptilian brain. From a child's perspective, it's called the feeling brain, where a child behaves based on how it feels. Just like adults have feelings that can influence the way one behaves, and if you're unhappy, if you're disappointed, if you're angry, what happens is you kick into a defense mode, a flight, fight, or freeze mode, where you can't think clearly anymore, you can't decipher, you can't think logically and rationally, and all you do is just react as opposed to responding. And we've also got what's called the upper brain, the brain that we use for thinking, the brain we think for rationalizing, for getting through and deciding what's best for us, because we're able to think about the first, second and third level consequences. And as adults, as we mature, we realize that each action has an equal and opposite reaction, and that we are destined to have consequences based on what we think, what we do, and how we behave. But that comes with age, that comes with maturity. But we also need to understand that children aren't quite there yet, and they can't process things productively all the time. But what the author is saying is that they will do it most of the time, but they can't do it all the time. Now, you see a child when it's watching television, when it's watching cartoons, they're just in the zone there, and you can't get through to them. Even if you say to them, hi, and shout or raise your voice, they're just focused so intently on what's going on. They're feeling so intently what's going on that their lower brain is activated and they can't get to the point immediately to process the upper brain activity. So what the author is saying here is that the things we need to learn how to do with our children is to give them some space and understand that there are times that they'll tune in and there are times that they'll tune out, and to respect that, to allow that, because that's all part of their growth and development. But we need to learn how to make eye contact and allow your child to make eye contact to ensure that they're not diverted, and to capture their attention even momentarily, to be connected with them, and that to understand that kids are human and they decide for themselves, and not to continue to nag at them, because this nagging is what gets them to switch off. This nagging is what gets them to push away, so to speak. And that we need to be careful and cognizant that bad kids or bad behaviour erodes the relationship between the parents. And we need to stop trying to convince our children all the time what is right or what is wrong, and to understand that there are times when they'll listen and there are times when they won't listen. So we need to pick our battles and pick our moments. And that kids get triggered by their downstairs brain. They become impulsive, they become reactive, and that when they're angry, when they're throwing or chucking a tantrum, it's not time to negotiate with them, it's not time to fight them, it's time to hug them, it's time to appreciate them, it's time to acknowledge their feelings, because unacknowledged feelings can damage a child in the long term, especially if you're doing it all the time. You need to first acknowledge the feeling, is what the author is saying, and then work your way to a productive outcome rather than threat and make the child feel unwelcomed and unworthy, because all feelings are valid. We just need to process it and work through them. And once a child gets flooded with emotion, what you want to try and do is to let that flooding dissipate, let that flooding disappear, rather than to inflame it and to keep it going. We all know that the secret to getting on with people is to give them space, and if somebody's angry, if somebody's pissed off, then to let them be, let them go. And it takes about half an hour for the hormones, the adrenaline and the cortisol to be absorbed and to be used up in one's body. But if you keep on flaming it, if you keep on fanning the flame, it'll just keep on getting worse and worse. So what the author here is saying is that kids need compassion. Their feelings need to be validated, not judged. And you can't use logic or reward when kids are using or engaging their downstairs brain, their feeling brain. So, kids need to be loved, as my mother used to say. Either you are in love with your children or your partner, or you're at war. So the choice is yours, So and once you start a war, then you've got to remember that war will last a lifetime, and you don't want your children to be outwardly collaborative, but inwardly rebellious. What you want is your child to be free to express their feelings but to know that they are loved and they're part of a loving environment and that they belong. Because what we want to do is we want to give them the sense of empowerment. We want to build resilience and grit in the children, and we need to let them understand that life isn't easy, and that they're going to have good days and bad days, and they need to process their bad days to at least minimise the damage that those bad days can create. So the author here makes another couple of really good points that I really enjoyed in terms of when it comes to eating, to be able to talk to your children and to tell them that there are two types of food. You know, there is growing food and there is fun food, and you need to have the growing food first before you can have the fun food, because the growing food is going to create the building blocks for your growth and development, for your health, and all those other things that are wonderful and important to one's life. So it's all about putting a spin on things. It's all about putting things into context and framing things in a way that becomes easier for those little minds to process, and to avoid, where possible, the power struggles. Don't get them angry. Try and avoid that anger sensation. And to also understand, from what the author here is saying, is that some children do have problems with eating. They may have a problem with the smell, the taste, or the texture. And these problems are real, especially when you're young. I remember when I was a kid, I used to absolutely hate the smell of parsley when it was being cooked. It would make me gag. I still remember today being at preschool at Roselands and smelling parsley cooking in minced meat, and it would just drive me insane. I could not stand the smell. It was that bad. And yet now I love parsley. So I think I'll leave it there. I'm about to start work. So once again, thank you very much for being part of this episode, this wonderful episode. I absolutely love talking about children and their growth and development. They're just little humans, they're little people, just like all of us. And wishing you all the best on this wonderful Friday, hoping that it leads into a wonderful weekend for all. And it looks like today is going to be an absolute cracker weather-wise. It's still, it's beautiful, it's warm, and it's Friday. Can't get any better than that. Thank you everybody, yassas, and bye for now.